Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to episode 9 of Shift Talk. So this one's gonna be a little bit sad, okay? We're gonna actually have to get a little bit serious here. I hate when that happens. Okay, so what we're gonna talk about today, which is a little bit ironic, kind of considering what I have going on with the car right now. But what we're gonna talk about today is the issues I had when doing the Whipple install. Now, I've made a couple videos about this before. I never actually mentioned the shop's name in those videos, and I'm gonna do that now. And I felt kind of weird about it at first because I never really liked the idea of, kind of trashing somebody's business on the internet, which is kind of essentially what this is gonna do. Now, I'm not gonna do pejoratives or be insulting about them, not in any way for this video, but I never really felt all that good, just kind of, like I said, trashing somebody else's business. But you know what? This has been my experience with it. I'm gonna try to be as fair and unbiased with the story as possible. So just keep that in mind. And also too, there's always two sides to every single story. Like there always is two sides. So you are hearing my side right now. The shop, which I'll mention in a second, but the shop, they're gonna have their side too. And you're not gonna be, you're never really gonna hear that story. So just also keep that in mind as well, that you're just getting my take on this and not the other parties. But to get to the chase, the shop that I had issues with, if you're in the Fort Worth area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you guys probably are familiar with this shop. They're a really big kind of name brand. They sponsor a lot of events around here. They do, everything Mustang, and F-150 Coyote related. Maybe a few, kind of one-off things, but very much a specific Coyote-based shop. But the shop was DSG. And it's really weird saying that because if you go online and look up DSG, right? You do your own research and try to, get your best take of what the shop does and like their quality of their work and everything like that, their reputation. You guys are gonna find that DSG has incredible posts online. Like anytime you look at DSG, like they always have like glowing reviews and praising comments, whether that's on Facebook or the Mustang forums. So it's like really weird sitting here and saying that I had issues with DSG because nobody else seems to have them. But I do have a little bit more insight on that, but I'm gonna get to that at the end of the video because it's more so hearsay than anything else. But on a brighter note, what I do want to say is there's a shop that I would recommend that they have been fantastic with me. They have actually fixed a lot of these issues I'm about to cover with DSG, and that is DSG Performance in Seagoville. Super, super good shop. Now it's kind of like a small shop, so if you guys go there, it doesn't look like the most beautiful thing ever, but they do incredible work, and I absolutely trust them with my 2025 Whipple Mustang GT. So Danny and the guys over there, appreciate you guys. I should have had my Whipple installed with you, not with DSG, but let's get into that right now. Okay, so the story with DSG. When I bought my 2025 Mustang, I started talking to specifically them because I've gone through them before with small kind of parts that I've done with my previous Mustangs. Now, nothing super big. They swapped headers for me. It's a pretty, cut and clean kind of work for a typical, Coyote-based Mustang shop. What else did they do? I think I've done a couple oil changes with them. And then also they installed a reverse sensor on one of my Mustangs as well. And what that reverse sensor was, is when you put it into reverse on the MT82, there's actually a sensor that detects you putting it into reverse, and that's what tells, one, the backup camera to activate, and two, for the reverse lights to turn on. So that went out, they swapped that super quick, super easy. So my whole experience before them, before the Whipple install, has been really, really good. They've been a fantastic shop for me. So it was a pretty easy choice. Now, back to my 2025 Mustang. When I first bought it, I knew I was gonna Whipple. So I was kind of looking around, kind of price shopping, just the Whipple itself, and I was pretty set on going to DSG right away. But they actually came up with the best price. They are a Whipple dealer, and there are definitely deals to be had on Whipples, whether that's like Beefcake Racing or Lethal Performance. But theirs was probably the best. You know, it's probably only like 100 or 200 bucks cheaper than everywhere else. But I was like, well, this is perfect. They're a Whipple dealer. They can order me the Whipple. They have the best price on it. And then I'll just do, you know, the install and the oil pump gears with them. So order the Whipple. 2 months later, it shows up. Now, a couple weeks before doing the Whipple install, I was working with DSG Performance. They did a few things for me. They did the short throw shifter, and then they also did, what else did they do? They also did the lowering springs. So I had been working with them, building a relationship with Danny and his guys. Again, they're fantastic. 100% recommend DSG Performance in Seagoville. But I was like, you know what? Let me get a quote from them for, you know, oil pump gears and, you know, the Whipple install itself. So got a quote for them, and they were definitely a lot cheaper than DSG. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, the quote I got from DSG was $3,700, and that was for Whipple install and for the oil pump gears and install of those themselves, which is not a bad price. That's definitely not a bad price. When I was price shopping though around different shops here in DFW, they're a little bit on the high end, but you know, DSG has a reputation that they can kind of charge that. That's sort of okay. But Danny's Performance shop, they quoted me a little bit cheaper though. And I think it was probably around the $2,500 range. So I was probably saving about $1,000 to $1,200. And I was like, you know what? I think I may just do that. I really like Danny's Performance shop, working with him in the short period of time. Definitely trust him. He was showing me a bunch of builds that he's done too. He's done Whipples before on Coyotes. He's also done Voodoo engine rebuilds. So I was like, okay, I think, you know, I feel pretty good, you know, if I just do it this way, you know, save a little bit of money. So that was what I was really planning on doing then, kind of 2 weeks before the Whipple arrived. And I didn't actually know the Whipple was arriving in 2 weeks at this point. I thought it was probably still another month out. But I was talking to Danny, he was shooting me some quotes. And I was like, you know what, let's do this. So I told him, yeah, I ordered it through DSG. So once it lands there, I'll just pick up the Whipple and then, you know, bring it over to him and drop the car off and we'll do the install. And to be honest with you guys, I kind of know how that looks. Like DSG hooked me up with a really good deal on the Whipple. They were, you know, planning on doing the install. But you know, at the end of the day, stuff gets really expensive. And if I'm going with another shop I trust just as much that is going to do it cheaper, and you know, at least they've shown me, you know, some of their builds and their Mustangs that they have. You know, I'm not like going to beat up on myself for that kind of situation, right? Like things just get really expensive. And now in hindsight, I really wish I did that. But back to the story. So the Whipple arrives at DSG and they text me. They're like, hey, Whipple's here. Want to come drop off your car right now? I got so excited. I was like, okay, you know what? Danny's Performance shop, I'd prefer to have them do it and it is cheaper, but I'm just too excited to do the logistics of bringing the Whipple over from DSG to Seagoville. And also the two huge boxes that would not fit in the Mustang. So I'd probably have to go get my mom's car and transport it that way, which I did not really want to do. I was like, you know what, whatever. DSG, they're a little bit more expensive, but they have the reputation to back it up. We'll just go there, drop the car off, you know, easy day, whatever. Once I get the car, I won't even care. I'm going to be so excited. So I do exactly that. I drop the car off, and they get to working on it really quick. It was really nice that they didn't, you know, wait a few days before working on the car. So the first thing they did, you know, they pulled the log file and then sent it to Whipple. And then they also did the oil pump gears and crank sprocket. I had that done for sure. You guys should probably know my opinion on doing the oil pump gears and crank sprocket. If you guys are an MT82 car and you're boosting your Coyote, do it. Just do it. I know it sucks. It's extra money they have to spend, but I think it's worth it. Drive without the anxiety of hitting the rev limiter and grenading your engine. But anyways, so they did the oil pump gears, they did the Whipple install, and then text message from them. And this is where the problems kind of first start. Now, I want to be super clear. This first problem is not DSG's fault, not in any way whatsoever. They were actually relatively helpful at first, and then it got really bad kind of later down the road. But this was a time period when Whipple had a hold on the tune, so they wouldn't actually send out a calibration. And my understanding of this is because there was some sort of EPA regulation or carb constraint rule or something that was pushed from Ford. Ford actually relayed that to Whipple and then told Whipple, hey, and since Whipple's kind of sponsored and works with Ford on this whole, Coyote Gen 4 project. They told them, hey, Whipple, you cannot send any more calibrations until we get this corrected. So honestly, at the end of the day, DSG's hands were tied because of Whipple's hands were tied because Ford's hands were tied. And this actually lasted probably, I think it was like a month and a half or so, maybe closer to 2 months. So right away, they were like, hey, you know what, we can wait for the tune, which it's probably gonna be a while, or we could just do custom tuning. And I was like, well, let me think on it. So I waited a day, and then the next morning I was like, you know what, let's just do custom tuning. Like, it's more money, right? So the tune is $550. There's $200 in credits that you have to unlock for their RTD4 device. And then there's some data logging that they charged me for, which we'll get into that. And that, I think, was unjust. But so we go with the custom tune. This was Friday, and to be honest, this is, if you guys ever heard the term, it's a Friday car. Mine was kind of a Friday build car, okay? That's, the quality of the work that went into that was very much, we wanna get to our weekend and forget this, we'll just call it done and then pass it to the customer. That's kind of the impression I got. So anyways, we do the custom tune. It took him a while to do it, and now I understand why, because I texted him in the morning and it should have been pretty quick. Rob Shoemaker had responded right away. They should have uploaded the tune, unlock the credits, do everything you need to do to get the tune on the car. Then they texted me probably like 3 or 4, in the evening on Friday, and like, hey, your car's ready. So I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. So I hopped in the Uber. I had an Uber there. Hopped in the Uber, did the 40-minute drive through traffic. That was the longest 40 minutes I've ever had in my entire life. Good God, was I excited. Get to DSG, I'm greeted with Megan. She's super cool. And she's like, hey, your car's ready. Like, here's your keys. Like, you're good to go. And I already did the payment on the way there, so didn't have to do anything of the payment when I actually got there. I actually, did the rest of it all just on the drive in the Uber to the shop. So I get my car, I start driving, and this is where problems start to arise. So the first problem I noticed when I got down the street is the blinker had a really, really weird cadence, right? So this is either left turn signal or right turn signal. I think the hazards are actually normal, but going left or going right, I quickly pulled up my phone, and it said whenever you flash the ECU or PCM or whatever it is, sometimes this happens, you just need to reset it. So, or reset the battery. Whatever, I'll just do it when I get home, not a big deal. Like they flash the ECU, not the end of the world. So drive home with a really weird blinker cadence. But I start getting on it, as you would, when you just pick up your new 700 wheel horsepower Whipple Mustang GT. So I get on the highway, floor it, okay? And there's huge cutoff issues. Like super significant cutoff issues with the car. Anything above 3,000 RPMs, especially in third and fourth gear. Second gear didn't seem as prevalent, but I think because of traction control was kicking in, it just kind of chopped power along with the cutout issue, so maybe didn't seem so apparent to me. But especially in third and fourth gear, significant engine cutout issues above 3,000 or 4,000 RPMs. Like you could not do a watt pull, not in any way. It just like a relatively smooth climb, and then once you hit 3,000 or 4,000 RPMs, it just got incredibly choppy. Something was definitely wrong, and I kind of coped a little bit, okay? I was like, oh, maybe it just needs the ECU needs to relearn the fuel maps or the mass airflow sensor, and maybe needs to dynamically learn the temperature or dynamics of the air. I don't know, I was coping, okay? Don't do that. I should have just turned around and be like, hey, no, there's problems with the car. But drive the car home, issues are still significant. And then I was like, well, I guess I'll just try to tackle the headlight issue. So I still haven't contacted DSG with the issues at this point, but I tried to reset the PCU. Well, I did reset the PCU. Or ECM, whatever that acronym is. You guys feel free to correct me in the comments. The ECU or PCM or both, whatever, question mark. But I did that with the battery disconnect, whatever ChatGPT told me to do. And it did display that I actually did reset it. Still the headlight issue. So I figured something more significant than what I can solve without any tuning device can fix. So I texted Megan, I was like, hey, I have a couple issues with the car. One, the headlights, the turn signals just have a super weird cadence. And you can hear it inside the car too. When you actually hit the turn signal, it was like a horse galloping. It's really weird. It wasn't just that steady, very even tempoed, kind of typical blinker sound that Ford comes with from the Mustangs. It literally sounded like a horse galloping, which I guess maybe on brand for a Mustang. But anyways, it definitely was wrong. And then I told her about the cutout issues. She's like, hey, yeah, bring it in tomorrow morning. We'll fix the headlight issue. And then we need to do more data logging on your car. And I know for you guys who are obviously not new to the data logging game, you would think, whoa, that's not a data logging issue. There's something else going wrong there. If you experience what I was having in my car, and hopefully I described it pretty well enough so far in this video. I'm new to data logging at this point. I had no idea what was going on with the car. So I was like, oh, okay, cool, I can do that. Sounds pretty cool. So I get out the Whipple, I think it's called the Whipple Tomahawk device, and I was looking up YouTube videos and people were doing data logging with that. I don't think you can do it anymore. I tried to figure it out, and then I just texted Megan, again at DSG, and she's like, no, you gotta get an RTD4 device, but we can set you up with that. And I was like, I could either give them the car and they do the data logging, which I don't know if they're gonna charge me for, because when I first picked up the car on Friday, there was a $200 charge for data logging, and I thought that was normal, and maybe that is, but they charged me for data logging and gave me a car that was wholly unfinished with problems that, if you just bear with me, we'll get into what actually caused that issue. But so I bring the car back, they do fix the headlight issue or the turn signal issue, and then they set me up in the RTD4 device. Now, before I go into that, what I also did is I emailed Rob Shoemaker and his team that Friday night, the night before I brought it to DSG. And, I gave them, my VIN number. I just purchased a tune through them. It was through DSG, but, under my name with my VIN, my car, everything. So I emailed them 10 o'clock Friday night. And at 10:30, I think one of the guys, I think his name was Anthony, and he gets back to me and he says, yeah, what we think is probably happening is you have a spark blowout issue. We've reviewed the tune. We've got the data logging from DSG that they sent us earlier in the day. You have a spark blowout issue. And then that morning that I brought the car to DSG, Rob Shoemaker hopped onto the thread and he said, yeah, he confirmed exactly what Anthony said. You're blowing out spark. That's your issue. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, oh, that sounds really bad actually. Holy crap. Is this catastrophic? But I brought that information to Megan and I said, hey, the tune we went with, Rob Shoemaker, him and his team are telling me it's a spark blowout issue. It's not data logging. Data logging is not going to fix it. The tune is just fine. It's that I'm blowing out spark. And she says, no, that's not true. You need to data log the car more and it's going to make it better. Oh my God, did I believe that? So I was like, okay, whatever. So I bought the RTD device. That was another $500. I spent another $200 to unlock that one because the $200 of credits I spent earlier was for their RTD device to be able to upload a tune to my car. Now I bought my own RTD device and I have to unlock that again with $200 worth of credits. So that sucked. And really, I really wish that Megan just kind of told me, kind of schooled me up a little bit about this whole data logging thing. I told her this is new to me. I've never boosted the car or done this kind of tuning before. I really wish she was like, hey, we can do it this way where we use our device, or you can purchase your own and then you can, data log later, use it for other vehicles, and I probably would have just bought one anyways, but I would have saved myself the $200 charge of them data logging my car, which they gave it back to me. And it wasn't even a data log issue, of which they still charged me for on an unfinished project. But anyways, so I buy the device and I start data logging it and I'm sending it to Rob Shoemaker, and I'm also emailing Rob Shoemaker. And also I'm sort of middlemaning this a little bit where DSG is telling me this information that it's a data log. I need to keep doing that. And then the shoemaker team is telling me that I'm blowing out spark. And again, keep in mind, guys, I'm brand new to this whole data logging thing. And, started doing data logging, started uploading everything to Rob Shoemaker and his team. And they're revising it and revising it and revising it. And they're looking through it, and they want me to do a specific data log with some sort of batch file or whatever. You guys probably know more of what I'm talking about than I am right now. But that required a computer. I had no idea what I was doing, so I was trying to reach out to Megan, and she wasn't being super helpful. I guess maybe not really her fault or her job, but keep in mind, I just spent $15,000 with them, okay? Including the Whipple, the tuning, the oil pump gears, all the install and labor. I'm $15,000 with DSG, and I would expect if they delivered a wholly unfinished product that was riddled with issues, I just would have expected they would have had like incredibly prompt and urgent customer service, which I absolutely was not getting from them at the time. So that was pretty frustrating, and that kind of continues throughout everything that happened. So still having issues with the car. Like I said, I uploaded the new data logs that I was doing to help Rob Shoemaker and his team seeing if it was a tune issue. And they get back to me, over and over again, like, hey, man, no, we think you're blowing out spark. So I texted Megan, I was like, hey, Rob Shoemaker, they're telling me it's a spark blowout issue. Okay, and at this time, I still didn't even know what spark blowout was. But I told her that, and she's like, hey, yeah, can you drop the car off in a week? And this is when I got pretty frustrated with them. Again, I just spent $15,000 on my brand new car with you. And it is a wholly unfinished product. Like, it runs like shit. Like, it completely runs like shit. I would have expected the customer service to be better. Oh my God, we have a problem. Bring your car to us right now. We're gonna get this fixed, right? Like, we can't have a customer who just spent $15,000 and have them wait a week. Maybe I'm being a little bit biased here and, maybe a little bit unfair to them, but I found that pretty frustrating that they weren't willing to just help me out right now, because that's a pretty scary feeling, okay? I just bought my brand new Mustang. That's expensive. As we all know, on these S650 Mustangs. Just spent $15,000 on the supercharger, tuning, oil pump gears, labor, that hurt, okay? That's just kind of, that was a very financially felt expense. And to get back a product that is scarily running poorly, I literally thought there's something catastrophically wrong. So it just kind of built into the urgency with me that I want to get this fixed right now. And for them to just, hey, drop the car off in a week and we'll take a look at it when we get to it. To me, that was a pretty unacceptable response. That was pretty frustrating to me. If I spent maybe $100, $200 on something there, and they told me, wait a week and drop it off and we'll see what we can find, I kind of get something like that, but not $15,000. That's way too much money for such a lack of quality of service. But I was like, okay, I guess if you can't get me in earlier, I guess I'll see you in a week. A couple days go by, and I started researching what the spark blowout issue is. And for those of you guys who don't know, when you take a look at a spark plug, there's a gap between the diode and the electrode. I think I got those terms correctly. The diode and the electrode, or maybe it's electrode and ground. Whatever it is, I'm gonna go with diode and electrode. I could be using these terms completely wrong, but there's that gap between those two pieces. And what happens is when you supercharge a car, there's obviously a much more induction of airflow that gets crammed through the cylinder heads, right? That's boost. That's what we want when we supercharge or turbocharge a car. Well, all that boost, there's so much more air, it actually blows out the ignition of the spark plug. So if that gap doesn't have tight enough of a tolerance, the spark gets blown out, as kind of the term sort of self-explains. Another way to think about it is think of a candle in the wind. If the candle isn't covered enough, that wind is going to blow out that flame. Same exact concept with the spark plug. So you got to gap the spark plugs a little bit tighter, and that way you avoid the whole spark blowout issue. So I learned what spark blowout was. I was like, you know what, regapping spark plugs, that's easy, I can do that. So then I was like, you know what, I can take on that task, that's pretty easy. So 40 minutes later in my parking garage, I regapped the spark plugs, took it for a test drive, and the car was perfect. Like, absolutely perfect. I was so incredibly happy with it. Like, genuinely just so excited that, one, I fixed the issue. Obviously not a huge, task to fix, but with the help of Rob Shoemaker and his team, they diagnosed the issue for me, and then I corrected the problem. This was frustrating though. Whipple instructions are very specific on exactly where you need to gap the spark plug to. And and for my own sake, I just emailed Whipple and asked them what I need to gap the plugs to, and they told me, I think off the top of my head, Whipple recommends for a stage 2 kit, 0.030 inches, or maybe it's 0.032. It's one of those. And again, the Whipple instructions say this, so just go with the Whipple instructions. But I just emailed Whipple, they told me exactly what the measurement should be, so gapped them to that, and we were as good as done with fixing that issue. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty good, but I'm still pretty upset. I just spent $15,000. I should not have had to dig into my car and fix an issue that was missed in the Whipple instructions. Like I said, the Whipple instructions are very, very good. They skipped this step. This was a misstep on DSG's side. Okay, they should have had the attention to detail to gap the plugs correctly before installing them. So this was pretty frustrating. Again, I'm happy it's fixed. It wasn't something incredibly catastrophic, but still, that's really annoying, and that's also pretty scary. Again, I'm speaking all this with the context that I just spent $15,000, because that's a lot of money. So I text Jason, I told him, this was the issue. This was, the problems I've had between the communication with you guys and with, Rob Shoemaker and his team. I'm kind of middlemaning the contradictions that you guys are fighting over. But I fixed the issue, so we're good. But I fixed the issue, so, it's taken care of. And he gets back to me, he's like, hey man, I'm so sorry. My guy should have done that. Next time you're in, I can give you, free labor on an oil change. And I was like, I feel like I could ask for a little bit better than free labor on an oil change. So I did. Spoiler alert, I absolutely did that. I was also working with Megan, but she ended up stop replying to me. Maybe I just annoyed her too much. I don't think I'm actually that annoying, to be fair, okay? Maybe I should actually show you guys the messages. I don't think I was actually that annoying with them. I was persistent, but I was always super polite, always super kind. But she ended up ghosting me, and that was pretty frustrating. But so I responded to Jason, and you know what? I'm gonna read the message right here. So I was like, hey brother, what if we did a headers install where I cover parts, of course, and you cover labor? I know it's a big ask, so I'm hoping it's not too unrealistic, just because I spent $700 between you guys and credits and an RTD4 device for the recommended data logging, and it ended up never being a tune issue. Do you think we could do that? He ghosted me too. Never got back to me. So I'm the one customer DSG ghosted. So overall, just a pretty unfortunate kind of series of events there. And to cover some of the things I definitely shouldn't have paid for, and two, I didn't want to pay for and shouldn't really have needed to. One, the $200 data logging charge that I paid before I picked the car up, if the car ran perfect and they did do correct data logging and that was the issue that, solved the problem for me, cool. I wouldn't have been too bothered by the $200. My big issue is they charged me $200 for data logging and then gave me back a car that ran like shit. That was pretty frustrating. Also, two, I never needed to buy an RTD4 device. And I also didn't need to buy $200 worth of credits to, be able to unlock it and do the data logging myself. It's nice that I have it now, and I do like that I can actually take some value out of the money I spent that I probably would have never spent, at least for a while. I would have just ran with the Rob Shoemaker tune and been happy with it. But, I spent, $500 on that thing. So $700, maybe you could say $900 later, again, for the data logging that they charged me the day before. I should have never had to spend that money. Okay, I was already spending money for them to, unlock the credits on their device, and then also the extra $550 for the tune. I should have got the car back in perfect order. Should have ran perfectly. I should have never had to buy my own device and own credits. So that was pretty frustrating. And then also too, the customer service was, in my opinion, pretty bad. Like there just wasn't a sense of urgency. And again, I feel like I'm probably being a little bit picky on this, but like I said, if I spent like $200 or $300 and they're a little bit slow to respond or just, weren't incredibly helpful, I can kind of understand that, right? They're busy guys. I get it. But I just spent $15,000. I know I keep saying that number, but that's a lot of money. I just spent $15,000 cash with them. And they delivered me an unfinished product that had a bunch of issues. I should have had really good customer service, I think. Maybe I'm being demanding there, but that is just so much money to not have a perfect product and incredible customer service afterwards. And I had neither. So that was pretty frustrating. So that was the initial first issue I had with DSG. Now there was a couple other things that kind of spawned later that was, again, a lack of attention to detail with whoever their employee is that installed the Whipple supercharger on my Mustang. These are a little bit more on the minor side for sure, but it's so frustrating because it was absolutely, what they did was contradictory to the Whipple instructions. Or they simply just ignored the Whipple instructions and they did their own thing. So the first thing that I had, after this whole ordeal, between me, the shop, and Rob Shoemaker, the first thing I had an issue with was there is a wire that goes to the fuse box that is additional with the Whipple. I think that fuse box wire runs to the fuel pump. I could be wrong on that, but there is an extra wire. Now, on top of the fuse box, there's a cover, and if you look underneath it, there's like a bunch of like lattice, kind of plastic lattice that, keeps everything, safe and secure underneath there. With that extra wire, what you have to do, and it literally says this in the Whipple instructions, you just have to cut out a couple gaps in the plastic just so that wire doesn't get pinched. They didn't do that. They just slammed the cover down on the fuse box, and the wire got pretty crimped, very much pinched, and also very damaged. Like it was almost fraying, or actually it was fraying a little bit. So I just went to the Whipple instructions, made the cuts where they say that you need to, and then I just spliced the wire, resoldered it, heat shrunk it, and then put the cover back on, and we were good to go. Not the biggest issue in the world for sure, but I wanted to take care of it before I actually ran into anything actually super serious with it, where that wire actually breaks and then whatever happens with the car that's needed for that wire doesn't work anymore. So I just want to take care of that issue before I actually had anything significant. And then another issue I had with their install is they Loctited the pulley to the supercharger. You're not supposed to use Loctite when you install those. The Whipple instructions are extremely specific on this. They say not to use red or blue Loctite when installing those 5 bolts for the supercharger pulley. They use red Loctite. And then when I went to go swap my pulley from 3.75 to 3.625, I stripped one of those screws. Now, I know it's kind of on me. I should have been more careful. I stripped a screw. Fundamentally, that's kind of my fault. I love how I say fundamentally and then kind of. But anyways, that's kind of my fault. I don't think that would have happened if they didn't red Loctite those bolts. And again, that's completely contradictory to the Whipple instructions. They never should have done that, but they did. So another misstep or just ignoring of how Whipple says these superchargers need to be installed. So that was a bit frustrating. I had to throw it all back together with a stripped screw, took it down to Danny's Performance. He got me all sorted out, got that stripped screw out, threw on the 3.625 pulley. He didn't use Loctite because you're not supposed to with these, and then got me all running well again. And then of course, did some more data logging, and then Rob Shoemaker sent me a revised tune, so car's pretty screaming now, okay? Now, and then to get to the last issue with DSG, is there is a stretch belt that goes on the harmonic balancer and then connects to the AC compressor. When you do oil pump gears, you have to take the entire front engine, cover assembly off along with all the timing components to get to the crank sprocket and the oil pump gears, which also involves removing that stretch belt. Now, I was talking to Danny, and he said what he always does is he just replaces it with a brand new belt. The belt's like $7 or $8, it's super cheap, but the stretch belts are kind of a one-time use thing, at least from what he was explaining to me. So if you take it off, it's best just go throw on another $7 to $8 belt. Like I said, they're not expensive. They're a one-time thing. You don't really want to reuse them if you've already removed it. So I had that belt snap on me, lost my AC. Not the end of the world, figuring what actually happened with the car, but had to take it back down to Danny's Performance again. He threw on that stretch belt for me, a brand new one. And that's when we just kind of talked about it a little bit, but he got me taken care of, so we're all good there. But it's also super frustrating that I spent money with Danny's Performance, and like rightfully so. Like, I'm happy to pay him for fixing these issues with DSG, but it just sucks that I am taking on the costs of their mistakes, negligence, and lack of attention to detail when it comes with installing these Whipple superchargers, right? So I had to pay Danny to do a little bit of disassembly, to throw on a new stretch belt. I also had to pay him for removing that stripped red Loctited screw, which never should have been Loctited, and for him to put on the new pulley, which I could have done in the first place. I think I could have done at least. And then, obviously I spent some time, fixing that wire that runs to the fuse box because it was very much splitting. So that's really the whole story of all the issues I've had with my Mustang. Now, I did make a video on this before where I just kind of quickly covered the issues and sort of how to avoid them, not really, my shop specific issues and the lack of customer service I've had with DSG. But a lot of you guys are saying in the comments, like, hey, you should actually do a video and, tell us which shop you went to. So here I am telling you guys the issues I've had with this shop, DSG Performance. Pretty frustrating. And again, like I've said before, like they're a fantastic shop, okay? Like anytime you go look at reviews or people on, Facebook, Mustang groups and DFW, like they just have like glowing comments, glowing praises, incredible reviews. People posting like, hey, thanks to the guys at DSG for getting, whatever tuning issues or whatever issues sorted out with their Mustang. They do like super crazy quadruple digit turbo builds, twin turbo builds. Like they know their stuff. They're really, deep into the Mustang Coyote game. And it just really sucked. I had such an opposite experience with them when it comes to everybody else posted online. But here's where I'm going to get into a little bit of gossip, okay? This is the hearsay I was talking about. When I was kind of talking with Danny about these issues, and his guys, they were kind of saying like, this is not the first time they've had something like this happen, where somebody has something they want to do to the Mustang, big or small, they bring it to DSG, there's some faults and issues with the install, and then they end up bringing it to Danny, and then they fix it. I don't really want to go too much more on this. This was just hearsay, but I figured if I'm gonna make a video kind of explaining my entire experience and everything I've heard and everything I've worked with, that was something that they have told me. So, I don't know how true that is. I'd be pretty curious about it. If you guys have had issues with DSG in the past, I'd again, like I said, I'd be super curious, but unfortunately, that was my experience. Now, the car is running great. We fixed all these issues, and I am super, super happy with it now. I definitely spent money that I should have never have spent, but you know what? It's life. You move on, you take hits. There's misfortunes that are going to happen, especially for my gentlemen out there. As a man, you're going to take losses and misfortunes in life. It's going to happen. It sucks. And the only thing you can do is try to action it, move forward and try to correct the situation. So here we are. We're enjoying the 2025 Whipple Mustang GT now, and everything just seems to be all right again. So I know this was a little bit of a sad and depressing shift talk video. We definitely did a little bit of trash talking, I think. But I try to keep it biased in this video. I didn't want to just like absolutely trash the shop and, you know, like just make them look terrible. Like I said, there's always two sides to every single story. So what you guys are hearing is my story, my side, not theirs. So maybe there's some information or some stuff I didn't know about. Who's to say? But anyways, I appreciate you guys for tuning into episode 9 of Shift Talk. I know this is probably a bit of a long rant. Hopefully it was somewhat tangential and understandable. I did my best. Sometimes I feel like I rant and it doesn't even make sense half the time. So anyways, appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm gonna give you guys my typical spiel. Don't worry about liking, don't worry about commenting, don't worry about subscribing. If you guys are here enjoying my content, that's the most important thing to me. I just want you guys to take value from what you guys are consuming on YouTube on Rev Theory Productions. So I'll let you guys go. Thanks for watching. Take care. Also, we love Kramer Berettas on this channel, especially the yellow ones.